Donald Tusk's press conference after the cabinet meeting. Among the selected media representatives, the Prime Minister mentioned a detail. The deficit is bigger, and it has to be honestly recorded in the budget law, because in some sense we have achieved more than expected. The Prime Minister did not say by how much this year's deficit was increased, nor did anyone present at the conference bother the Prime Minister with uncomfortable questions about finances, and Republican journalists who wanted to ask the question were not allowed in. It was not until several hours later that the announcement was made that the deficit would reach as much as 240 billion zloty. This is 56 billion zloty more than expected. According to government propaganda, everything is to blame for lower inflation. But does this justify such a gigantic hole in the budget? It seems to me that no, because yes, we have a decrease in inflation, but generally speaking, the government raised VAT by 5% on food, and these generally bad changes would normally make up for these losses here. Besides, if the government raises energy prices, gas prices, there are higher tax revenues associated with that as well. 56 billion zloty is slightly less than the annual cost of the 800 Plus programme. By a wide margin, this amount would be enough to raise the tax-free amount to 60,000 zloty. In the first year of Donald Tusk's government, the budget deficit turned out to be so huge that it even surpassed that of the pandemic. These are not jokes. Here it is about billions of zloty that Poles are deprived of. That's why they can't afford to implement all these programs they've talked about here. We will all pay for the budget amendment. The higher deficit means that the finance minister will have to borrow additional billions of zloty, and this borrowing is getting more and more expensive, as can be seen from the yield on 10-year bonds, which jumped to 5.9% after yesterday's press conference. This means that the state will have to pay more interest to creditors. The increase in yields in a country, if they are rising, means that analysts and capital markets are judging the economic situation adversely. The economic situation is worsening, and higher interest rates are some kind of response to the higher risk they're facing, that the economic situation in Poland could go wrong. The Law and Justice Party says the collapse on the revenue side of the state coffers is to blame for the government's inept policies. In fact, there is a political acquiescence to the non-payment of taxes, and this can be seen in particular in VAT and CIT. The opposition is sounding the alarm that the dire state of public finances is a harbinger of cuts to social programmes. All the more so since next year's budget law assumed an even larger deficit, as much as 289 billion zloty. And here, not even the European Commission has come to the aid of Donald Tusk's government. The coalition did not uphold in the negotiations the exclusion of defence spending from the excessive deficit procedure. This means that the government will have to look for further savings in the coming years. This is a serious blow to Donald Tusk's team and Andrzej Domański, who claimed as recently as February that defence spending would not be considered in the excessive deficit procedure. We have an agreement with the European Parliament on the new EU fiscal architecture. Increased investments in defence will not be taken into account in the excessive deficit procedure. Fiscal adjustments will be allowed to last longer. The reality, however, looks different, and that means that Donald Tusk, who is supposed to play everyone in Europe, has himself been tricked again.